Hello everybody, this is the second week lecture of Psych 3280, Neural Base of Consciousness. And this week I'm going to introduce some of the research methods that will be important to prepare, for you to prepare the tutorial this week. Before we start, let's recap the week 1 lecture content. First, I introduced the so-called golden circle method to explain research matter in the order of why, how, and what. And why means the motivation of any kind of study. Why do we do that? And then how is the method to address the question? How do we address that question? And then finally, what is the target of the research question? What we did, or the outcome of the research, what we found. And I suggested to use this golden circle method to address or prepare your any kind of written assessments as well as oral presentation for this unit. And especially today, this week, you will do the oral paper presentation if you are assigned for this week or in a week 4 in a tutorial. And I recommend you to go from why, background or significance, and how, and then how the method, and then what is the sort of finding of the paper in that direction. And this I also try to do with our unit, Psych 3280, why we are interested in consciousness and how we are going to study consciousness. And what we find in this consciousness research is the topics or the objects that we are going to see over the next couple of weeks. And in terms of the topics, I covered neural correlates of consciousness research program, or NCC, and then the philosophical program of the hard program, and finally the integrated information theory. Throughout psychology 3280, we will adopt triangulation formulation of the research program. And what it means is that we are going to combine the 3 different kind of approaches to consciousness research. One is a phenomenology, and another one is experimental data, and then theory. And then towards the end of the lecture, I covered a bit of the basics in terms of the neuroanatomy and basics about the neurons to understand consciousness. And then eventually you decided to pick which of the papers to present in this week of tutorial. Okay, so the learning objectives of this week is first, how can we characterize our phenomenology to understand the methodological component. And for that matter, I will introduce psychophysical method to understand phenomenology. The second component is to understand how we can measure the neural activity in the brain. And you will learn what is the source of the neural activity. And chapter 2 of Quest for Consciousness is this week's reading material. And I would strongly recommend to go through the reading material, but especially towards the end of each chapter, there's 1 to 2 page recapitulation. And that's going to be very helpful to understand the gist of each chapter. And if you don't understand the contents on the recapitulation, then I would recommend you to go through the contents of the chapter. Okay, so now we are going to talk about how we can characterize phenomenology. So the most straightforward way to characterize phenomenology is to introspect your own phenomenology. Introspection is to reflect on your experience, And it may sound boring or too straightforward, but it's not as straightforward as you might think. And I will be demonstrating it with visual illusion in a minute. But for example, rather than visual illusions, you can also introspect several aspects of your phenomenology. For example, if I ask you to identify the border of your visual field, by introspection, you'll find that it is not something that you normally notice without thinking about this kind of issue. Probably your visual field has a border around here, but just by introspecting, and for that matter, you need to focus on some kind of points in front of you, and then try to see how much of the visual field you are seeing. But it turns out to be quite difficult and also interesting in terms of knowing how much area of the world you are seeing, and this can be done by introspection. And then after starting with the introspection, to make it more scientifically rigorous, you need to use a report to make the introspection to convert into scientific data. And this can be done by various methods. For example, verbal reports, such as the ones that are most prominently done in the patient's case reports, and the written reports, and then button presses, which can be done even babies or animals and so on. And then any kind of other voluntary, volitional controlled behavior measures, such as eye movements and hand adjustment or pointing. Eye movements can be used to, rather than reporting yes or no, asking people to look at the right or left, or hand adjustment to estimate some kind of slant or, the sharpness of the, heel. Or the pointing, without talking, or even if if you cannot speak, pointing can be used to tell other people about your phenomenology. And then finally, there's a method called experiential sampling, and this is a relatively new method, increasingly used in the ecological research, in consciousness research. And how it works is that rather than asking people to respond each trial in a standard experiment, people are alerted by something like cell phone, and then this experiential sampling application alerts you to enter what you are experiencing right now. And this can be done by verbal reports or written reports or button presses after the sampling method is alerting you. Okay, so here's a quick table that summarizes the pros and cons of introspection and the reports. Pros are that of the introspection is that it can approach conscious experience most directly and also transparently. However, introspection itself can alter experience. As you might have realized, that when you are trying to introspect the boundary of your visual field, you are attending to the visual field boundary. And as you will see in the lecture on the consciousness and attention can substantially alter experience itself. So to the extent that the introspection is related to attention, and also attention alters consciousness, introspection itself alters what should be observed. Not only that, introspection itself, or phenomenology per se, is not super easy to understand or to render scientific investigation or analysis. On the other hand, reports in the form of the verbal reports or button response is easy to quantify. And so therefore, we can do science more rigorously. However, reports are not the experience per se, and therefore it can lead to the wrong attitude. What I mean by that is described in following figure. So this is a guy who is trying to find something that he lost in the park, and he's looking for that let's say wallet under the light, and then the policeman is asking, why you're looking for this here. Is it where you lost it? But it's not the case, because this guy is just trying to find it because it's easy to find under the light. And this is the same kind of attitude shared by some philosophers or psychologists who are only focusing on the reports and not looking into the phenomenology per se, or abandon completely the introspection. Of course, characterizing phenomenology is a bit more difficult than just analyzing the visible observed, behaviors or reports. But unless you try to look at the phenomenology per se, or looking for something that is very difficult to capture, you are not going to understand neural base of consciousness.